Good day everyone, my name is Danica May Cabides and I will be the one who will discuss the first part of Lesson 2. So Lesson 2 is entitled The Self as Cognitive Construct. So before I start the discussion, let me ask you first this question. So how do you think others see you? Maybe some of you would like to see them in any way others perceive them, or some of you would like to see as a human being or who really them inside. So in my opinion, each of us have their own personalities, characteristics, and attitudes. And we don't need to please everyone to accept us for being who we really are. Just be ourselves and show the world the real us. So I am who I am. There are various definitions of self. The first one is, according to William James, self has two aspects. So, by the way, William James is an American philosopher and psychologist who trained to be a physician before going into psychology. So, William James distinguished the self as I and the self as me. So, I is the thinking, acting, and feeling self, while me is the physical characteristic or capabilities. So the self as I reflects the self as a subject of experience, while the self as me is corresponds to the self as an object of experience. So next one is Carl Rogers. So Carl Rogers is an humanistic psychologist, and in his theory of personality, I is the one who acts and decides, while me is what you think or feel about yourself. So there are other concepts similar to self. So these are the identity and self-concept. So identity is composed of personal characteristics, social roles, and responsibilities, as well as the affiliation that define who one is. While the self-concept is what basically comes into your mind when you are asked about who you are. So generally, thought of as our individual perceptions of our behavior, abilities, and unique characteristics. For example, beliefs such as I am a good friend or I am a kind person. So these thoughts are part of an overall self-concept. So now let's proceed to self-schema. So self-schema refers to a long-lasting and stable set of memories that summarize a person's beliefs, experience, and generalizations about the self in specific behavioral domains. So it refers to the mental organization of informations that pertains to the self. So this self-schema includes these four. So the first one is hobbies. So this is an activity done regularly for pleasure or relaxation. For example, my hobbies are watching Korean dramas and reading books. Well, and the next one is nationality. So this is the status of belonging to a particular nation. Third one is family. And the last one is religion. So religion is the particular system of faith and worship. Now, let's proceed to Sigmund Freud. So Sigmund Freud is one of the influential psychologists of our generation, and he sees the self and mind as a result of interaction between these three parts. So the first one is the id. Id is the instinctual part of the mind that contains sexual and aggressive drives and hidden memories. So id is the selfish, wishful, in nature, illogical, and fantasy-oriented. Next is ego. Ego is the realistic part that mediates between the desires of the id and the superego. So it modified by the direct influence of the external world, and it is the decision-making component of personality. And the last one is superego. It operates as a moral conscience. So it applies the values of society which are learned from one's parents and others.
Symbolic interactionism. Under the theory of symbolic interactionism, George Henry Mead, 1934, argued that the self is created and developed through human interaction. There are three reasons why self and identity are social products. First, we do not create ourselves out of nothing. Society helps in creating the foundations of who we are, and even if we make our choices, we will still operate in our social and historical context in one way or the other. The next one is, whether we like to admit it or not, we actually need others to affirm and reinforce who we think we are. We also need them as a reference points about our identity. The last one is, what we think is important to us may also have been influenced by what is important in our social and historical context. There are times, however, when we are aware of our self-concept. It is also called self-awareness. Self-awareness means that you are having a clear perception of your personality. Carver and Shearer, 1981, identified two types of self that we can be aware of. First is the private self, or your international standards and private thoughts and feelings. And the second one is the public self, or your public image and commonly geared toward having a good presentation of yourself to others. Self-awareness also presents us with at least three other self-schema: the actual self, the ideal self, and the oath self. The actual self is who you are at the moment, and the ideal self is who you like to be, and the oath self is who you think you should be. Self-awareness can be positive or negative, depending on the circumstances and our next course of action. Self-awareness can keep you from doing something dangerous. One of the ways in which our social relationship affects our self-esteem is through social comparison. According to social comparison theory, we learn about ourselves, the appropriateness of our behaviors, and as well as our social status by comparing aspects of ourselves with other people. There are two kinds of social comparison: the downward social comparison and the upward social comparison. The downward social comparison means that this is the more common type of comparing ourselves with others. We create a positive self-concept by comparing ourselves with those who are worse off than us. And the upward social comparison, comparing ourselves to those who were better off than us. Social comparison also entails what is called self-evaluation maintenance theory, which states that we can feel threatened when someone outperforms us, especially when that person is close to us. In this case, we usually react in three ways. First, we distance ourselves from the person. The second one is, we reconsider the aspect of skill you were performed in. And the last one is, we try to improve that aspects of ourselves. However, in the attempt to increase or maintain self-esteem, some people become narcissistic. Narcissism is a trait characterized by overly high self-esteem, self-admiration, and self-contenderness. They are often charismatic because of how they take care of their image. Taking care of that image includes their interpersonal relationships. Thus, they will try to look for better partners, better acquaintances, as well as people who will appreciate them a lot.